So Yahweh is the only God. That was the promise that we're tracing here from Isaiah chapter 45, verse 18. God says, I am the Creator and I know of no other. It's me. There never has been another. There never will be another. He's the only God. He's the only Creator. He's the only provider. He's the only defender of humanity. His name is Yahweh, the God of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob. King David knew this very well. I want to show you a couple of verses in 1 Chronicles chapter 17. I want to show you a couple of verses before we get back into the story of Sennacherib. Look at these verses from 1 Chronicles 17. David has this to say about his God, our God, the only God, and His relationship to His chosen people Israel. God's relationship to His chosen people Israel. Just 3 verses. Look at these. 1 Chronicles 17. What's happening here, just to give you, this is the equivalent of 2 Samuel chapter 7. The same events are going on in 1 Chronicles 17 as happened in 2 Samuel 7, which is where God promises David, you will have an eternal throne. He has just promised David, who wants to build him a house. David wanted to build God a house not of cedar, but out of, or not a tent, not the tabernacle. He wanted to build him a permanent house. And God said, no, you're a man of war. You won't build me a house, but I will build you a house. I will build you a dynasty. And this is part of David's response to what God had done for him in His promises. David says, O Yahweh, there is none like you, nor is there any God besides you. According to all that we have heard with our ears, David's heard it, he's learned it, he's lived it, he's experienced it, that Yahweh is the only God, there is no other God. The next verse says, concerning God's relationship to His people Israel. And what one nation in the earth are there any people, is there any other nation, any other country that has a relationship with you like Israel does? The answer is no. What one nation in the earth is like your people Israel, whom God went to redeem for Himself as a people? God went into Egypt to buy the freedom of Israel back with the price of the Passover lamb. So God went to redeem Himself for Himself a people, these Israelis, to make you a name by great and terrible things in driving out nations from before your people whom you redeemed out of Egypt. The story is of Joshua coming into Canaan, the promised land, how God drove the Perizzites and the Hivites and the Jebusites and all these people out of the land so that Israel could inherit the land. He had promised this land to Abraham, and He was going to give it to them. What nation is there that God has made promises like this? I'll redeem you. I'll buy you out of Egypt. I'll do all these wonderful things. I'll create these 10 plagues in Egypt, the great and terrible things. I'll spread the Red Sea. I'll part it so you can walk across on dry ground. What God and what nation has a relationship like Yahweh and Israel? The answer, none. There's only one God, and there's only one people that God has ever chosen to be His particular people. The next verse, the last verse we look at here, says, for your people Israel you made, was God's choice, you made your own people forever. And you, O Yahweh, became their God. I showed you these 3 verses because what we're seeing in Sennacherib here, the Assyrian king, as he goes into the land of Canaan, into Israel, the Assyrian king is taunting the Jews by saying, what kingdom is there that has not been defeated by me? What nation's gods have been able to stop what I've done in my army from rolling through, and my God who is mightier than all of them? Let's look at the map again to figure out where we are. The northern kingdom is the green. The southern kingdom of Judah is in the orange. Where we are in the book of, where we are in the book of 2 Kings chapter 18, the northern kingdom, the green, has just been defeated by Assyria. Everybody, every Jew that lived in the green area was moved out by God. They were forced out of the promised land because of disobedience. The northern kingdom has fallen. And the Jews who make up these 10 tribes in the north have all been moved out to Assyria, areas around rivers in Assyria. There's several names that are listed there. But they're gone. Yahweh did this. And you may want to ask a question, why is it that Yahweh allowed the Assyrians to destroy the northern kingdom of Israel and to take all those 10 tribes of Jews out of the land? Why did God do that? What's the answer? Because He made a promise. Look at the promise that He made them. In Deuteronomy chapter 8, verse 47. In the first 15 verses of Deuteronomy chapter 28, God makes it very clear that if you will keep my commandments, my mandates, everything, you will be like Midas. Everything you touch will turn to gold. Everything will be wonderful. Our relationship will be pure. There'll be no diseases like you had in Egypt. Every woman's womb will give birth. All your crops will be very fertile. Your cattle, your herds will give birth every season. You will lack nothing. You'll have food in plenty, water plenty. Everything will be plenty. You will be the preeminent nation on this earth. And people will come and bow to you because of your relationship to me. But in verse 15, He changes his tune and says, but if you will not obey the law that I've given through Moses, there will be consequences. And in Deuteronomy chapter 28, same chapter, but well toward the end of it, as He's making these promises of discipline and punishment and cursing to Israel, this is what He says to His chosen people, Israel. Because you did not serve Yahweh your God with joy and a glad heart, for the abundance of all things. I mean, He's given you everything. Why would you not serve Him? Why will you choose idolatry and false gods? God says, you didn't serve me, therefore you shall serve your enemies. That's plain enough. If you won't serve me, if you'd rather worship the false gods of the other nations, then you will serve those other nations, and that's the way God made it. Therefore you shall serve your enemies whom Yahweh will send against you. Where did the Assyrians come from? Who sent the Assyrians into the northern kingdom, into the green area to defeat Israel? Who did that? Yahweh did. God did. Because He made them a promise. And He keeps, listen, not only the wonderful promises, but He keeps these promises too. If it comes out of His mouth, it will be done. The Lord will send these nations against you in hunger, in thirst, in nakedness, and in the lack of all things. I've given you all things, and you wouldn't worship me, so I'll take them away. Is it fair? What do you know about God? Is this a fair sentence? Is it fair? Is it just? Is it purely and perfectly just? Has to be, because God is perfect justice. He gave them away. He gave them a way to live a wonderful life. They didn't want it. They chose the false gods, and God did exactly what He said He would do. He'll put, God again, He will put an iron yoke on your neck until He has destroyed you. There were harsh consequences to Israel for disobedience. Look at the next verse. The Lord will bring a nation against you from afar, like Assyria and Babylon. The Lord will bring a nation against you from afar, from the end of the earth as they knew it then. As the eagle swoops down, a nation whose language you shall not understand. A nation of fierce countenance who will have no respect for the old, nor show favor to the young. These people that are coming in are brutal. Don't you know that's why Jonah didn't want to go to Nineveh? Nineveh is the capital of Assyria. And Jonah didn't want to go to Nineveh for several reasons, but these were the most brutal people on earth at the time. The way they fought war, the way they handled their prisoners of war was brutal. And everybody knew it. Nasty people. Nasty, brutal, hate-filled people. And Jonah didn't want to give them the Lord's message because Jonah knew enough about God to know that you, God, are so wonderful that you will save those people too, and they don't deserve it. And Jonah didn't want to do it. That's why he jumped on that ship going to Spain, and everybody had to throw him off into the water. God had to come and bring the fish to swallow him. Guess where he took him? Right over to the shores where he wanted him, and he threw him up on the beach. That's what the Scripture says in the book of Jonah. That was Nineveh. Those were the Assyrians, a nation of fierce countenance who have no respect for the old. They'll drag your mother out of the house and cut her head off, no problem. That's who these people were. Who sent them? God did. And that ought to give you just that much pause when you try to toy with this God and get away with things that you shouldn't try to get away with. He sent these people. The next couple of verses, it shall, this nation that will swoop down like an eagle, it shall besiege you in all your towns until your high and fortified walls in which you trusted. You didn't trust in me. You built the walls and thought nobody can break through our walls. I'll see to it that they break through your walls, God says. The walls in which you trusted, they will come down throughout your land, and this nation from afar shall besiege you in all your towns throughout your land, which Yahweh God has given you. You see the contrast? God has given you this land. Israel, don't you remember the nations that God dispossessed so that you could be here? Why aren't you serving this God? Why instead are you serving the gods of the nations that God hated and was done with? What are you doing? Yet Israel does this, makes these decisions over and over and over. I just want you to see these people are coming because God made a promise. If you disobey me, I'll send them in. And they've come in. So what has happened is, you go back to the vision of the green map and the orange map. The green is done. God has fulfilled His promise. They're out. The king of Assyria, here's the verse where it says it. 2 Kings 18:11, then the king of Assyria, Sennacherib, he carried Israel, the northern kingdom of Israel, the 10 tribes, he carried them away into exile to Assyria. God said He would do it. He said He would send a nation from afar who had no respect for the aged or the young, and here they are. He put the Jews in these places, in Halah and on the Habor, the river Gozan, and in the cities of the Medes. Because, you say, but why? Why is God allowing this? I thought these were God's people. These are the Jews. Yes, but He made promises to them. You do good, you'll be blessed. You do bad and disobey, you'll be cursed. Very simple. Because they did not obey the voice of Yahweh their God, but they transgressed His covenant. His covenant being the Mosaic law. It says it right here. Even all that Moses, the servant of the Lord, commanded. They didn't do it. Look what it says. They would neither listen to it nor do it. They didn't want to hear that old Mosaic law. Forget about all that. That is old-fashioned. How many of you hear things like that about your 2,000-year-old Bible? Oh, it's just an old book. It's old-fashioned. Things have changed. We're modernized. My goodness. Still reading out of that 2,000-year-old book. Somebody quote me Hebrews 13:8. Jesus Christ the same, yesterday, today, and forever. You better believe I'm reading out of this 2,000-year-old book. This book is going to be our book in 2 million years from now, because it's the story of our Savior, Jesus Christ. But Israel refused, and they wouldn't listen to the words of God through Moses, and they certainly wouldn't do it. And now Yahweh is allowing these Assyrians, who've already destroyed the north, obliterated it, taken all the Jews out. About 10 years have gone by, and Yahweh is allowing the Assyrians to come into the southern group, into the orange part of the land, into Judah. We pick up right here, 2 Kings chapter 18, verse 13. Now in the 14th year of King Hezekiah, This is a good king. Sennacherib, the king of Assyria, came up against all the fortified cities of Judah and seized them. Now look what that says right there. An Assyrian king, a pagan who does not believe in Yahweh or worship the proper God, the only God, he has come into Judah and seized all the fortified cities of Judah. Read this with me again. It, the nation, shall besiege you in all your towns until your high and fortified walls in which you trusted come down throughout your land. And here we have it happening in the 14th year. The king of Assyria, Sennacherib, has come in and has camped against all the fortified cities of Judah and taken them. He's defeated them. Who brought him in? Well, God did. But God's going to stop this time. But I think what's going on here is God is letting these Jews in Judah who were idolatrous, just like the north was, but not quite as bad. Every few generations they had a good king that respected and honored the Lord and followed the law. Hezekiah is one of those good kings. And because of the greatness and the humility of Hezekiah, we'll see what God will do. In 2 Kings chapter 18, verse 28, it says this. This man has marched on Jerusalem. This king of Assyria, remember, he sent 3 messengers. And the 3 messengers have marched on to the city of Jerusalem, and they're near the wall of Jerusalem, and the 3 messengers of Hezekiah have come to meet them, and they're talking back and forth. And then the messengers of Hezekiah, the Judah king, says, we don't want you to speak these things out loud. We don't want you to say these things out loud. We don't want the other Jews to be scared by what you're saying. And they cried out even louder in Hebrew, Rabshakeh, which is one of the messengers of the Assyrian king. He cried out with a loud voice in Judean. This is Hebrew. So that not only the 3, but every Jew on the wall could hear it. And this is what he said. Hear the word of the great king, the king of Assyria, Sennacherib. Thus says the king. Do not let Hezekiah, your Jewish king, don't let him deceive you, for he will not be able to deliver you from my hand. He's not strong enough. Nor, and that's a true statement, Hezekiah's strength would not be able to defeat the Assyrian army. But here's where the man got off. Nor let Hezekiah make you trust in Yahweh, saying, Yahweh will surely deliver us, and this city, Jerusalem, will not be given into the hand of the king of Assyria. He's saying, don't let Hezekiah feed you these lies. Don't believe this. This is not true. I hope you can see from this as we keep going through this that the men from Assyria are God worshipers. They're just worshiping the false gods. They say your God Yahweh can't protect you from the Assyrian army coming in. And you'll see this right here in this verse. This is holy war. So many of these fights, these battles, these wars in the Old Testament against Israel are the pagan gods coming in to fight Yahweh. Look at what it says in verse 33. Has any one of the gods of the nations, see, we have just gone through everybody. Our army rolls over anyone we want to. That's the kind of fierceness the Assyrians had. And so they taunt the Jewish people and they say, have any of the gods of the other nations that we've destroyed, have they been able to stop the mighty king of Assyria and our mighty God? Have they delivered his land from the hand of the king of Assyria? The answer is no. He says, where are the gods of Hamath and Arpad? These are places that the Assyrians have already destroyed. Where are the gods of Sepharvaim, Hena, and Eva? Again, names of cities and places that the Assyrians have already rolled through and destroyed. Have they delivered Samaria from my hand? What's the answer to that? The northern kingdom of Israel, the capital was Samaria. Was Samaria able to stop the king of Assyria? No. But why not? Because God sent them. God sent them to destroy the northern kingdom. And God's not ready for Jerusalem to go down. He's simply trying to get Jerusalem's attention, refocus, and get back into proper worship with me. I will take you out also. Look at what the next verse says. Who among all the gods of the lands have delivered their land from my hand? Keeps on running his mouth. This is the king speaking through his messenger. But these are the king's words. Who among all the gods of the lands have delivered their land from my hand, that your God Yahweh, remember when you see the capital, all capital letters in Lord, it's translating that sacred four, that's a sacred tetragrammaton, the Jews call it, those four consonants that make up the word Yahweh. And they say, the king says, if all the other gods couldn't stop me, even the Jewish God Yahweh of Samaria, then why is Yahweh going to be able to deliver your city from my hand? He handed my grandfather 10 years ago, Samaria. Those are Jews. They live in the land I came from. Why would He protect you? We've already done this once. I'm coming into Jerusalem. He gets ahead of himself. He says a lot of things, and God hears all things, doesn't He? So his spokesman here is recounting Assyria's military successes, military victories, and he's encouraging the Jews on the wall to be terrified by what they're hearing and surrender. You go tell Hezekiah when he fills you full of this nonsense that Yahweh can defend you and Yahweh can defeat me. You tell Hezekiah, not on your life. We're not fighting anybody. We will surrender to the Assyrians. That's what they're trying to get out of Israel. Remember how this started? Before Hezekiah became king, Israel would give Assyria 100,000 sheep a year and the wool, or the 100,000 rams and the wool of 100,000 lambs. And once Hezekiah became king, he said, I'm done with that tribute. I'm not giving the king of Assyria anything. Well, the king of Assyria has come to collect. And that's why he wants these Jews to surrender. Let's get back to where we were. Keep paying me tribute. Get the money flowing again, or I will destroy you and your holy city. That's what he's saying. 2 Kings 19:1. Hezekiah comes into the picture. So far, we've seen the three messengers from the Assyrian king speaking to the three envoys from Hezekiah. But now we hear from the king himself as chapter 19 opens. What is the great one, the obedient Jew, the wonderful king Hezekiah going to do? The Assyrians far outnumber his armies. He's got two little tribes, Judah and Benjamin, down in the south. They would crush him like you could crush an ant under your thumb. They would crush Israel. What is Hezekiah going to do? When Hezekiah, the king, heard it, this mouth, this Yahweh taunting, what gods of the nations have protected them? How can your Yahweh protect you? When Hezekiah heard this taunting, he covered himself with sackcloth and he entered the house of the Lord. That's the temple. What does he do when he's got trouble? Who does he go to? Straight to God. Not to his counselors, not to his cabinet, not to his secretaries. He goes straight to the Lord in prayer. He puts on sackcloth. That's humility. Sackcloth and ashes is a sign of humility and dependence on Yahweh. I am in the pickle of my life, Lord, and so is Judah. So are the people down here. He had complete dependence on God. Jump with me to verse 5. So the servants of King Hezekiah came to Isaiah. This story actually also, I should say this, is also found in, I believe it's Isaiah chapter 36 and 37. Same story of Sennacherib coming on Jerusalem. Isaiah takes 2 chapters to write about it. I think they're chapters 36 and 37. Just write that in your notes. Yeah, that's the right. 36 and 37. So here it is. So the servants of King Hezekiah came to Isaiah. You know how I always like to pronounce these Hebrew names as close to the Hebrew pronunciation as I can. How do you think the name Isaiah is said in Hebrew? Caleb, give it a shot. We've said Isaiah all our lives. Anybody want to give a shot at how a Jew today says the name Isaiah? Yeshayahu. His name is Yeshayahu to a Jew. Yeshayahu. But Isaiah says to the servants of King Hezekiah, thus you shall say to your master. Isaiah has sent servants or Hezekiah has sent servants to the great prophet Isaiah. You find out from the Lord what I should do. And Isaiah gives this message from Yahweh. Thus you shall say to your master, thus says Yahweh, do not be afraid. Do you need to hear anything else? That's enough, isn't it? If God says, do not be afraid, you should be able to go into your living room, sit on your comfortable chair, and just wait for God to do what He does. And God tells them, do not be afraid because of the words that you have heard, with which the servants of the king of Assyria have blasphemed me. I have heard what they've said, and I'm going to take care of this my way. It's become more than personal. They aren't just picking on my people Israel now and picking on the holy city Jerusalem and on my temple. They have blasphemed me directly and said, like the others did in the Arameans, He's a God of the mountains, not a God of the valleys. They've gone too far, and I will take care of this myself. Verse 7 says, behold, I will put a spirit in him. This is the king Sennacherib, the Assyrian king. I will put a spirit in him so that he will hear a rumor and return to his own land. And I will make him, here's another promise, I will make King Sennacherib, the one who has sent these messengers with these blasphemous words against me, I will make him fall by the sword in his own land. He's not going to die on foreign soil. I'm going to send him back to his house. I'm going to wait till he's worshiping his false god in his false god's temple, and I'm going to send his sons in there to put a sword through his body. And that's exactly how the king dies. When God makes a promise, friends, He keeps them. This will happen. I'll show you. Verse 10. Thus you shall say, these are still Isaiah's words, through God's words through Isaiah. Thus you shall say to Hezekiah, king of Judah, Hezekiahu, by the way, Hezekiahu, do not let your God, whom you trust, deceive you. Oh, I'm sorry, I skipped too much. From verse 7 to verse 10, these are the words of the king of Assyria again, warning the people of Israel. He says, thus you shall say to Hezekiah the king of Judah, do not let your God Yahweh, in whom you trust, deceive you, saying that Jerusalem will not be given into the hand of king of Assyria. What did God just say through Isaiah? What were the words of God through the prophet? Jerusalem will not be given into the king of Assyria. I'm going to have an evil spirit plant a rumor. He's going to turn around and go defend his kingdom, and he'll die in Assyria. And the king says, don't let God lie to you. Now what has he called our God Yahweh? He's called him a liar. He says, if you've received a message from God that Jerusalem will not be given, then your God is lying to you. Behold, you have heard what the kings of Assyria have done to all the lands, destroying them completely. So will you be spared? Their gods weren't strong enough, neither are yours. The next verse says, did the gods of those nations which my fathers destroyed deliver them? He's repeating the same things from before. Even Gozan and Haran and Rezeph. He's even naming more cities and more peoples that Assyria has destroyed. The sons of Eden who were in Telassar, were they able to stop me by praying to their God? No. Where is the king of Hamath, the king of Arpad, and the king of the city of Sepharvaim, and of Hena and Eva? Not only were the nations and the cities destroyed, I killed all their kings. Where are they? They're dead. A couple verses later, Hezekiah gets news of this. Hezekiah responds. In verse 15, Hezekiah prayed before Yahweh, always straight to God. Hezekiah prayed before the Lord Yahweh, and he said, O Yahweh, the God of Israel, who are enthroned above the cherubim, you are the God, you alone, of all the kingdoms of the earth. You've got one king saying, this God's too weak, all the other gods couldn't stop me, and neither can your God Yahweh. You've got the other king, Hezekiah, the king of Judah, properly understanding who God is and saying to him, you alone are God, and you're the God of all the kingdoms of the earth. You have made heaven and earth. Not only are you the king, but you are their creator. And I want you to show them that you're their creator. Incline your ear, he continues his petition to God. Incline your ear, O Yahweh, and hear. Open your eyes, O Yahweh, and see. And listen to the words of Sennacherib, this idolatrous, blasphemous king of Assyria, which he has sent to reproach the living God. He comes in the name of dead gods to reproach the living God, Yahweh. Please open your ears to this. He's depending on Yahweh to defeat Assyria, because he knows he can't. The next verse, truly, O Yahweh, the kings of Assyria have devastated the nations and their lands and have cast their gods into the fire. Hezekiah knows it's true what the king has sent in the messengers. His army's way too strong for Israel. He would crush them like an ant. And Hezekiah knows it. But Hezekiah also knows his God and his capabilities. Truly, O Lord, the kings of Assyria have devastated the nations, and they've devastated their lands, and they've cast all the false gods of the nations into fire, for they were not gods, but the work of men's hands. They were wood and stone, so they have destroyed them. But you're not a God of wood and stone. You are my creator. You're the God of Israel, and I stand on your defense. Please defend your city, Jerusalem. Save us from this. Now, O Lord, our God, Yahweh Elohim, the Lord, O Lord, our God, you are our Jewish God. We are your people crying out to you. I pray, deliver us from his hand. Not just so we can keep living on earth. Look what he wants. Look at the heart of Hezekiah and why he's such a great king. Not only so we'll be delivered from death, but so that all the kingdoms of the earth may know that you alone, O Yahweh, are God. This is holy war. This is holy war. This is the God of the Assyrians versus the God of Israel. This is holy war. These men are coming together, the Assyrians, to defeat Yahweh's people. It's holy war. And Hezekiah wants all the kingdoms of the earth to know that there is one God, and he's the God of Israel, the God named Yahweh. Then Isaiah, the son of Amoz, sent to Hezekiah, and he had a message for him. God hears Hezekiah's prayer. God speaks to Isaiah the prophet. Isaiah the prophet says to Hezekiah, thus says the Lord. This is the message the Lord has given me, Israel's prophet, to share with you. Hezekiah says this, thus says Yahweh, the God of Israel. Because you have prayed to me about Sennacherib, the king of Assyria, I have heard you. What do you think would have happened if Hezekiah wouldn't have prayed this prayer? I know you know this phrase. Sometimes we have not because we ask not. And Hezekiah humbled himself, recognized the situation that he was in physically. There was no chance. But with Yahweh, what I say Sunday, God plus one is a majority. And Hezekiah is counting on that. There's no one who can stop his God, and he knows it. And God says, you got that right. And I'm going to show all the kingdoms of the world that I alone am Yahweh. You watch what I'm going to do, Hezekiah. Because you humbled yourself before me, because you brought the blasphemies of Sennacherib to me, I heard you. 8 verses later, God is speaking to Assyria and their king Sennacherib, and he says, because of your raging against me, because of your arrogance has come up to my ears. Therefore I, the God who you think isn't strong enough to defeat you, I will put my hook in your nose and my bridle in your lips. This is something that came from the Assyrians. This is how they would treat their captives. They'd jam a hook through their nose and pull them on a line back to Assyria. They were brutal. The bridle in your lips, the hook in your nose, this comes from the Assyrian practice. God says, you don't think I don't know you and how you play? You're about to get a bit of your own medicine. I'm going to do it to you. I will turn you back the way which you came. And in verse 32 and 33, this is what it says. Therefore, thus says Yahweh concerning the king of Assyria. Basically, I've heard enough. I've made my judgment. You're done. You cannot blaspheme this God of ours. You cannot toy with Him. He's not a God to be toyed with. He will not be mocked. And this king of Assyria has mocked Him. And this is what He says concerning the king of Assyria. He will not come to this city. What city? Jerusalem. He won't come here. He won't even shoot an arrow here. And he will not come before it with a shield. He won't throw up a siege ramp against it. The walls of the city were tall, and the way they would fight is they would bring in loads of dirt, just continue building dirt. That was the siege ramp. They would build a dirt ramp so that they could walk eventually up the ramp to the walls or get over the wall. And God says, this man won't come into my city. He won't shoot an arrow in my city. He won't build a dirt ramp against my city. He won't do anything here. By the way that he came, the same way he will return, and I'll kill him in his own land, around his own God. He's taunted me as the living God. I'll kill him in front of his false God. By the way that he came, the same way he will return, and he shall not come to this city. I love this God, don't you? Look at what he says in the next verse. For I, Yahweh, the God of Israel, the weak God that you blasphemed, I will defend this city to save it for my own sake. No one could have gotten into the city on that day. I will defend this city to save it for my own sake and for my servant David's sake. Then it happened that night. This is the thrilling conclusion. How is God going to do this? What is God going to do to this massive Assyrian army surrounding this little town of Jerusalem with 185,000 soldiers? How is He going to give Israel victory? He has made yet another promise. The man won't come into my city. He won't shoot an arrow here. He won't build a ramp here. By the way he came, I'll send him home. How is God going to deliver this? How is He going to do this? And He does it very simply, without a single Jew raising an arm, no swords, no clubs, no spears, no man-to-man combat. God takes care of this Himself. It happened that night that the angel of the Lord, who is that? That is Jesus Christ. I've told you this before. Let me say it briefly again. Before God the Son was born in a manger in Bethlehem, He always existed as God the Son, but He was only God. He wasn't God and man. He became Jesus the Christ, Yeshua HaMashiach. He became Jesus the Messiah at the point of the virgin birth. That's when the Son of God also became the God-man. But when He was just the Son of God, the eternal Son of God, there were times when He needed to come to earth. And when He came to earth, He presented Himself as the angel of the Lord. I could prove that in a dozen different verses. You'll have to take it on faith if you don't know that. Jesus, before He was given that human body, but as the eternal Son of God, it was Jesus, the Son of God. Let's call Him Jesus because that's eventually who He became. It happened that night that Jesus, pre-incarnate Jesus, went out. the one who was blasphemed as not being strong enough, the Father sent him, and Jesus struck single-handedly 185,000 in the camp of the Assyrians. And when men arose early in the morning, these are the Jewish men of Jerusalem, when the Jewish men rose early in the morning, behold, all of the Assyrians were dead. What did God say He would do? I will defend this city. How did He do it? Just like this. He sends another part of Himself. He sends God the Father, the first person of the Godhead, sends the second person of the Godhead, God the Son, to kill 185,000 Assyrian soldiers that night. There's never been another man, there never will be another human conqueror, not Samson, not any of the great warriors of Israel, who's ever come close, not even exponentially close. If you dumbed it down, nobody's ever come close to killing almost 200,000 men in one evening. But your Savior did it. And why did He do it? For His own sake and for the sake of His servant David. No one will enter Jerusalem. I will not be mocked. Who is this pagan God who thinks he can blaspheme me like he has? The next verse says, remember, God made a promise to Sennacherib that his army would he would turn around, go back to Assyria and be killed there. We have to see whether God kept that promise, don't we? So Sennacherib, the king of Assyria, departed and he returned home. Well, that's funny. Who said he would do that? Yahweh, the God of Israel, said He would do that. He lived at Nineveh. That's in Assyria. It came about, now here's such great irony. God is a master at what He does. I'll say it this way. The God of the king of Assyria, Sennacherib, his whole reason for his bravado in thinking he could come into Jerusalem and destroy Jerusalem was that none of the other gods of the other nations were strong enough to stop him. And where does Yahweh decide to prove to him that I'm the only God that lives? In the temple of Sennacherib's false god. You think you can trust your God to defeat me? I've already killed your army and I'm about to kill you. I told you I was going to do this. It came about as he was worshiping this king in the house of Nisroch, his god. This is holy war. That Adramelech and Sharezer killed him with the sword. Now, I don't know what Bible translation you have, but some of the Bible translations have these two names, Adramelech and Sharezer, and between two commas it says, his sons. God would send His two own sons to kill him in the temple of his false god Nisroch that he thought was strong enough to defeat Yahweh and Jerusalem. You see the irony? Giant irony. You're telling me that you could take my city, Jerusalem, and defeat my people, Israel? And your God, Nisroch, can't even defend you on his own turf, in his own temple? That's the statement Yahweh makes. I'll take you out when you're bowing before a God that doesn't exist. I'll prove to all your people when they're dragging your dead body out of this temple that I alone am Yahweh and I won't be mocked. Adramelech and Sharezer killed him with the sword. Isn't that how God said he would die? Turn around, go back the way he came. When he's in his own land, I'll kill him with the sword. His sons took swords and killed him. And they, the two sons, escaped into the land of Ararat. And Esarhaddon, his son, became king in his place. Sennacherib, killed by his two sons in the house of his God, who he was just convinced had overpowered all the other nations and would overpower the southern kingdom of Judah and their God Yahweh. Convinced of it. Dies in the temple of his own false god. 185,000 will never be done again, or will it? 185,000 the angel of the Lord killed on one night. Will it ever happen again? Will the angel of the Lord ever come back in the person of Jesus Christ, the Lion from the tribe of Judah? From Revelation chapter 19, he who is called faithful and true. Well, this second person of the Godhead, who we now know eternally is the God-man Jesus Christ, will he ever come back with the sword that proceeds from his mouth and slaughter unbelief on this planet? Will it happen again? Oh yeah, is the answer. Revelation 19 speaks of it. He will come back and slaughter all unbelief and usher us into His glorious millennial 1,000-year kingdom, His reign on earth. 185,000, friends. I don't know what the number will be by the time Jesus comes back, because remember, the 7-year tribulation takes place before He returns to the Battle of Armageddon. And in the trumpet judgments, we see a quarter of the earth killed. Or the seal judgments, a quarter killed. In the trumpet judgments, a third of the remaining humankind are killed. There's rampant bloodshed, rampant warfare on earth. We don't know what the number of earth gets down to, as those who've become believers are all being martyred in the tribulation. When Jesus Christ comes back, the Battle of Armageddon, I don't know how many He's going to have to kill, but whatever it is, He's going to do it, and He's going to do it alone. Just like He did on this night, when someone named Sennacherib had the gall to blaspheme the living God. He'll return and do it again. That's what He does. He will defend His name. At the end of the millennium, it's different, because Satan will come out of the abyss where he's been kept for 1,000 years, and he'll gather a human army that's huge. It says like the sand of the seashore in number, but there's no killing there by a sword, by Jesus. It simply says God called down fire from heaven and they were done. So there's not the pomp, there's not the circumstance, there's not the warfare. It's like, you know what, Satan, we're done. My plan has concluded. We're moving on into eternity, and we're going there without you. And He calls fire down from heaven, and they're killed just like that. So yeah, you could say that He does it again, but not in the way He did it on this night, and not at the way He does it at the Battle of Armageddon with those swords. Let's close in prayer.